Hello, my name is Jo Mason and I am Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Do I have any other takers for introducing themselves? Okay, in that case, could I please ask Councillor Wright if he would mind giving us a karakia to open our meeting. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, e te iwi, ngā te hapuri o tō tātou rohe, o Horowhenua, tēnā koutou ngā kaunehere o te rohe nei, tēnei te mihi ara ki a koutou, kei rau te koro wai. Tēnā koe te tātou rangatira, Mayor Bernie, tēnā koe, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai tō tātou reki aiho karaiti me te araho te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, amen. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Robert. Thank you very much. Welcome to you all. Welcome, fellow councillors. Welcome to staff and especially to the first meeting of our newly appointed Chief Executive for her new term. Also, members of the public that are here in the chambers, plus members of the press and those that are watching on live stream. Thank you for your participation. We don't have any apologies in front of us. Thank you. We do have some public participation today, and shortly we'll welcome David Roach, President of the Foxton Tourism Development Association, Viv Bold and Christina Payton shortly. Any late items? None. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure whether I should approach this in this section or announcements, but just to let the table and the public know that given we are talking about a couple of reports, certainly around the growth strategy and somewhat less to degree the blueprint, that I've sought advice around whether I need to declare, given my work, and take comfort that this is a very broad policy. It's district wide, and basically anyone who's got land is potentially going to be able to participate in this now and into the future. So the advice has said I could continue to participate, and I intend to do so.
Thank you for that advice. It's good to be upfront in terms of that, and appreciate your making that known. So we now move to confirmation of the minutes of our council meeting of the 13th of April 2022. Could I have a mover and a seconder that these are true and correct record? Councillor Allen, Councillor Brannigan, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Any announcements? None. Thank you. So, could I now welcome our members of the public who wish to participate today, and first of all, David Roach, speaking on behalf of the Foxton Tourism and Development Association. Welcome, David.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Brent. You want me to sit over here or I can stay here? Go to the front. Thank you. Right. Thank you, members of the council, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Why I've declared an interest in the report from the community board is I actually got a presentation from Foxton Tourism Development. So I'll make our presentation for the tourism development first.
David, you may remove your mask if you are speaking. It might be easier for people to hear.
Thank you. I was bogging up there, so that's great. Right, you can read it better. I've sent it out, so hopefully you've all read it. I can go through it if you want to, or have all councillors read the... Right, no, you haven't. Right, a report from the Foxton Tourism Development Association by President David Rhodes. Foxton FTDA opposes the recommendation made by the Community Board for the permanent removal of the horse-drawn tram, on the grounds that the late item presented to the Community Board failed to give the FTDA sufficient time to prepare their response. This was going to be carried out on behalf of the FTDA by David Roach. On recognising that there was a conflict of interest, Mr. Roach declared his conflict of interest and retained from taking part in the discussion, putting the FTDA at a disadvantage as the board members had expressed their views before the FTDA support member had the opportunity to speak. I'm going to go into the history of the tram station. This tram station came into being after Mr. Grant Stevenson suggested building historic in appearance, building related to the horse-drawn tramway. In 1881 station design was chosen on the base with an added veranda linking the public toilets to the tram house. At that time, the estimated cost was $156,000. The Chamber of Commerce set up a small committee to investigate public reaction to the proposal. Therefore, the proposing that formed the FTDA was formed to become the driving force to raise the necessary funds. They were successful in obtaining a government grant of $60,500. A fundraising dinner at Queen Carnival raised $30,500. An auction of a Goldie donated by Mr. Carl Sims, and an increase in income from debentures issued by the FTDA. After all these events, there was a shortfall of $38,000, which Foxton Borough Council covered to enable the government grant to be uplifted. Right, reasons. The FTDA were the driving behind the concept and the building of the stamped tram station, incorporating public toilets and information centre. Enclosed is a 2007 copy of a letter from Horowhenua District Council giving the FTDA the right to garage the horse-drawn tram. This letter states, Council undertakes to provide garaging for the horse-drawn tram on an ongoing basis, and access to the barn through the cap is preserved in the clause in the lease for the later space. And I sent a copy of that out it's on the council letterhead for all your councillors. With regard to the Demoller Trust, the request was made to remove the tram during the winter months to facilitate more room for customers during adverse weather. The FTA agreed to find suitable garaging for the tram and secure temporary garaging, which was donated for a 6-month period. The FTA then advised the Demoller Trust that they were prepared to remove the tram for 6 months on a temporary basis. The FTA intends to reinstate the horse-drawn tram as a tourist attraction. And finally, the proposal to Council is Council supports the FTA with the right to rehome the tram in its original home, the tram station, when it is back in operation. Now, I've been thinking about that. That's our request to Council. I know on the audit paper, the board has requested Council to find suitable. So I'd like the word if unsuitable accommodation to house the tram and display, then the FTDA would intend to reinstate the horse-drawn tram intend to use the horse-drawn the tram as an original home. So we're leaving it open for Council if we can find suitable accommodation for storing it and displaying it, then we will not put it back in. But otherwise, we want to reserve the right to put it in when we get it in operation. Right, so mate, that's our presentation. I can answer any questions from anybody.
Any questions for Mr. Roach? Councillor Tupper.
Yeah, thank you. How many horse-drawn rides or tram rides are there in the Lower North Island? Do you know?
Sorry. Yeah, no idea, I'm sorry. Since being president of the Tourism Development, we have been reinvested with the horse-drawn tram because they had gone into recession. The society had gone into recession. So part of the trust deed was that the property always belonged to Tourism Development. You will recall some months ago I put in an article in the Chronicle seeking expressions of interest on we want to get it up and running. We believe it is another asset to the tourist beach of Foxton. We had received an intent from a gentleman in Woodville who was actually the president, or he was the president of the Horse Clydesdale Society, and he expressed an interest. We just have to find him some land around Foxton is what he's after, and he's interested in taking up the challenge of operating the horse-drawn tram. So we're making progress. During this next 6 months is really what we want to secure and have it in operation by next summer. That is the intent of FTDA. Sorry, I can't tell you how many people go on it though. I wasn't part of the society before that.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David, look, these operations rely heavily, I imagine, on volunteer labour and a real willingness within that community to see it come to pass. Have you got an idea of what sort of strength of numbers you've got in the community to deliver this on an ongoing basis?
The idea, I don't have any exact numbers. There is offer of support, and one of the supports come from Mr. Wright that used to run the horse-drawn tram, and he's keen to support anybody. Our intention is to make the tram roadworthy with a warrant of fitness, and we will supply it to an operator, and the operator will operate it under. And I don't have time, and most of the committee don't have time to run around feeding horses, and I've got no idea how to shoe a draft horse. So we wanted to step back from that part of it, and we will provide the tram to an operator to get it so that we can keep it going. But we believe that the tram itself is part of what we want to sell and is part of Foxton. So I was trying to step back from running it as a voluntary group and to run it on someone on a commercial basis. That was the idea, to try and make it work better, because the struggles was like all volunteer groups, weekly struggles. Yeah, and it falls down on one or two all the time, and we just wanted to, we thought that if we had someone to run it as a professional, and he has his own horses, he looks after his horses, and we'll just keep the tram up to a warranted fitness state, and it'll be a win-win for both. That was the idea behind it. That help?
Deputy Mayor Mason.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Roach, thank you for the presentation. I just wondered, the Foxton Tourism Development Agency, is that what you are? Association. And you've talked about the Demolin Trust and the fact that they want to increase their ability to, I'll take my mask off, provide services to more people, particularly through the winter months. Would that be valued in terms of tourism opportunities, having more people able to attend the coffee house there?
I think they're both tourist attractions in their own right. coffee bar is a destination for coffee and visitors. The horse-drawn tram is a destination, and it's as a tourist attraction to Foxton. I think it's part of Foxton, and it's part of the original tourism where we all started. So I haven't tried to compare one against the other because they both are significant in bringing people into Foxton or bringing them into the Horowhenua.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Smith. Two questions. Mr. Roach, in your report on the first page, you talk about sort of what I'll term process issues in terms of how this was brought to the Foxton Community Board. And can you just talk me through how you would view curing or fixing that at this point? Like what you would actually be seeking to be done differently, if anything. And then my second question relates to the October letter, October 2007 letter, and just wanted to clarify: is it when did council communicate around changing what the undertaking was in that letter?
Oh, sorry, I'll start with the letter first. Council were made aware last year that Tourism Development had taken over the horse-drawn tram that had come back to us, and we did have a meeting with officers regarding how we go through the park and what we do. And at that stage, we had no firm commitment that we were going to when we were going to operate it. So that really is the thing. Other than that, what came the letter that I've been dealing with the Dutch demolished cap in correspondence with them, and they requested would we consider it, and we said yes, we would consider removing it because it's sitting there. But I made it quite clear at the start that I wasn't going to take the horse-drawn tram out, and it can't be housed outside. It has to be housed. If you're going to park it up in all the weather, you might as well throw it away. So I said it has to be stored somewhere, but then was trying to secure someone that was going to allow us to store it and not pay, because I don't see why Tourism Development has to pay rental for a building, because we already had a building. We had right to a building. So why would we want to go off and pay rent and store it somewhere else? So yes, it took me about 3 months to secure the site, and he said that he's quite willing to store it, and as I said, he's stored it for 6 months, and that's how the 6 months come about. So that clears it. Why I emphasise the fact that it was actually built to house the tram, a tourist information centre, and a public toilet. The cap has come along after. It was never set out like that to start with, and that's where it come from 2014. Or prior to that it was, and then 2014 it was revamped, and there was a new lease drawn up with not with the horse-drawn tram, with the cap, which didn't involve the Horse-Drawn Tram Society. So we were left out of the talking, which is disappointing. But it's only the fact that I suppose the Dutch cap wanted permanent, and we've had to vacate it while the winter, and but we want to reserve the right that when we do have it in operation, that we have it back on display. Unless council can provide something alternative, we want to reserve the right to put it back there. That help?
No, that's supplementary.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. We'll get to the matter shortly. Viv, welcome to the table. Thank you. Yes,
You're welcome. Thank you.
away you go.
Today's agenda is a very thick one on many subjects, as you all probably have read through and seen. I'm trying to make a short synopsis of it all. On the blueprint, basically. If I run off target a bit, that's okay. I would pick option 3. As the blueprint is not a non-statutory document that is now too old for any financial use. The Horowhenua Trust seems to have come up with this document, consumed by old values, and that seems to use most of our bequeathed reserve land and doesn't make our Maori Polynesian community proud. From pages 47 onwards, Council doesn't seem to be interested in creating a strong, cohesive town, but in conflict and shame. This page on page 50 is particularly upsetting, where it is pointing out particularly affordable housing options. And referring to the working poor, I think is a really sad statement to make. It also refers to the social housing as important to pursue, but won't be on a significant scale. As Levin's poor now live in containers and caravans, I think the council should really think about this. I mean, I was raised that a community is only as strong as its weakest link, and we seem to be getting more and more of them. I particularly have never ever put down the public have never seen the transforming Taitoka/Levin central strategy or the wellbeing shared pathway strategy. Christine has helped me and said it's on the web somewhere, but I'm not a very good computer person, okay? And I don't think Mr. Clapperton ever actually put out the final version to the public. Many of the public, this comes back to the Horowhenua Trust, unfortunately, many of the public are not allowed into the AGM in November. It seems to put out a small ad in the Chronicle, RSVP, and as the Trust closes its financial books in June, I'm sure, and we are
Sorry, I just want to reassure you that the Horowhenua New Zealand Trust is not the author of this strategy.
Isn't it? It
No,
said it at the start of it.
it's not the author of it. This is a council strategy. It's not the Horowhenua New Zealand Trust.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take that on. Thank you. Okay. Right. Well, whereabouts are things like improvements and maintenance done to our memorial building, please? Doesn't this fall within that area of work needed, like a new kitchen? I'm pleased to see David Wright has got you guys to acknowledge risk and assets. Next, we need to see climate change and environmental factors come in. On page 23, I made reference to Christine about the fact that it sounds very much like you have sounded as though Three Waters has been accepted by the 1st of July 2024. Yes or no? You've just told me it hasn't really been accepted, but the documentation is printing that way on page 23 if you read it. Okay? 9.2, growth and strategy. Now this one doesn't make sense at all because it says 2014, it states 5,500 additional houses, but only 9,200 additional increase in people. Well, if you do the maths, it's only 1.5 people in each house. Are they in containers too? The fact that we're getting no annual plans and no long-term plans to even be the public to even look at is going to be such a worry. And also, the other thing is, if this is the case, what last month we had about the personal waters usage was 395 litres per person per day. That's a lot of water, isn't it? We need water things in place, stormwater infrastructure, before we start working on houses. The other thing that really worries me is the fact that does Levin need 2 golf courses? We have an excellent one at Moochie Road at Hokia. Help and assist this one instead of making another one out of more Maori Trust land, just because some people think they should be able to own this. The ground at Hokia Ohau belongs to other New Zealanders. All ground on Tararua Road should also be made available.
A point of order, is that an item on the agenda today?
No, we're not. Again, that is a private matter in terms of the golf course. It has nothing to do with.
In the agenda then, it also makes reference to rezoning of land, right? And all the ground at Tararua Road, instead of being rezoned for housing just yet, why don't you let Woodhavens take it up for vegetable production? You also have reference in here, Bernie, about the fact that you attended a ratepayer and resident meeting in April. You didn't. We didn't have one. Page 31 is blueprint. There is no obligation to adopt this document.
Any questions? Thank you. Mrs. Payton, welcome to the table. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to our new Chief Executive. Now, this blueprint item, I can see, is going to create a lot of discussion, or it should do. So I would like the remarks that I'm going to make to be included, please. Please consider including in this blueprint a section concerning the Horowhenua District Council's responsibilities as a statutory manager of the Ramsar wetland, which is situated in the Manawatu River estuary at Foxton Beach. This wetland is officially a site of international significance. The Ramsar wetlands is also associated with another unique geographical feature, namely the Manawatu River, which runs from coast to coast. There are only 6 rivers worldwide which demonstrate this phenomenon. The Ramsar wetland being of international significance further empowers this council to require all upstream communities to desist from discharging wastewater and other pollutants into the Manawatu River. That behaviour is currently not administered rigorously enough through the Resource Management Act. And I'm going to add here, and this council has never actively opposed through a resource consent process anybody else discharging wastewater
into the Manawatu River. It's something you shouldn't be proud about. The RMA is due to be replaced, and we must all be on guard to see that the phrase reasonable mixing is not carried over. For those of you who are not aware of the legal interpretation of the word reasonable, I will supply it, and this came from my own lawyer at the time. Reasonable means incomplete, and that is why we still have polluted waterways. Therefore, in my view, it is HDC's responsibility to include a section in this blueprint document that specifically highlights and plans for environmental responsibilities long term, which must also include refusing to support in any way resource consent applications from upstream communities. And you'll be getting one from the Palmerston North City Council pretty soon, I would think. And I hope that for once this council stands up and says no. Which must also include refusing to support in any way resource consent applications from upstream communities and businesses from using our site of international significance as a repository for waste. The Ramsar site can also be a money earner, if this is what stimulates your thinking. Can be a money earner for this district if it is appropriately managed. You can do it, and you can do it now by featuring it in this blueprint. Any questions?
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Just in relation to that last paragraph on the second page of the submission, would inclusion, or would the fact of inclusion of the Ramsar site in the destination management strategy that is signposted in the blueprint, would that meet your expectation or requirement, or are you suggesting it needs to be more prominent in this particular document?
It would be a start, because I want to know what the majority of the thinking is around this table, given, and I have to say this again, given the poor record that this council has of looking after that particular environment. This council has never opposed any upstream pollutant. It's got to change. We've got to look after things.
Thank you, Mrs. Payne. Appreciate that. Thank you to those members of the public that have participated today. We will now move to page number 7, which is the proceedings of the Foxton Community Board meeting of the 11th of April 2022. Could I move recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 that we receive the proceedings of the Foxton Community Board, that we receive the minutes of the Foxton Community Board, and that we note the requests from the Foxton Community Board, which we will deal with shortly. Moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So our first recommendation is 2.4 that Council requests the Chief Executive to prepare a report into implications of and options for granting land access for the Foxton Beach Community Centre to build a 3-bay garage, and report on implications and options for boundary line adjustments for the land upon which the Foxton Beach Community Centre sits. Is happy to move, Councillor Allen, and Deputy Mayor Mason will second. Any discussion? Councillor Tupupua.
I guess just around the timing in terms of the priorities and work program we currently have before us, like, is this, you know, in terms of the table, where would you rank this in terms of requesting the work to be done?
Chief Executive might like to respond to that.
Through you, Your Worship. I understand in talking to officers that this isn't necessarily a complex piece of work, but it's just about making sure that we present some options. So it's very unlikely this is going to come back to the next Foxton Community Board meeting, but I would anticipate that this is something that within the work program of Mr. Nelson that can come back in the next few months to the Foxton Community Board.
Councillor Brannigan.
We had questions or discussion? Thank you. Just to put a little bit of history to it, that councillors probably are aware or may be, sits on the block of land, part of the Darwick Street Reserve, which is, as I understand it, deferred commercial and zoning. And there's been some talk for quite some time now around the council table about potential commercial development on the land. The little bit of land that the community centre are looking for is certainly a small square that's already fenced into the community centre precinct, and it just allows them, with securing of that land, to go ahead and build this garage that they drastically need in terms of carry out that operation that is fundamental to the welfare of a lot of people in that community, particularly people that need it the most. And I think the question is whether it's just a simple matter of boundary adjustment, taking a little bit away from the wider Darwick Street Reserve and making it available on a longer term basis, rather than I think we've offered them at different times at sort of at least year by year, which obviously poses some problems in terms of fundraising. So just wanted to highlight that as into the mix. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Tupupua.
Oh, just one other question. Oh, it was probably, maybe you'll know it. Did I hear so that it's pretty straightforward around the area in which this could potentially sit, but you mentioned fundraising is, so they don't already have the money to erect the garage, they're just wanting the land at this stage?
As I understand it, the money for the garage is the least of the worries. It's the securing of the land is the crucial bit. Yeah.
So the recommendation is on the table. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Our next recommendation is 2.5, that Council requests the Chief Executive to work with the Wimwell Trust and the Foxton Tourism Development Association to look at options for an alternative storage site for the Foxton Tram. Any questions first? Councillor Jennings.
Just a question through the Chief Executive, and it's probably really unfair to put you on the spot on this. But in relation to that letter that Mr. Roach has provided, the October 2007 letter, and that highlighted paragraph about the undertaking, as I understand it, that wasn't carried forward into the new lease agreement, and I'm not sure of what's happened in terms of engagement with the association around that. But I guess I'm wanting to get a sense around does council, what is it your view that council has an obligation to the association at the moment around finding that alternative site or resolving this issue, or is it council's position that it's ultimately the association's challenge to resolve? Is that clear?
Through the chair, I understand in talking to officers earlier this afternoon that the view is that it is ultimately the association's challenge to resolve. But I think it's worth acknowledging that there's a lot that's happened between 2007 and where we are today, including the development of Te Awaho Newstrom, where there was obviously a number of conversations with a number of organisations and agencies. So I wouldn't want to pretend that I was across all of that. I'd need to take some time to better understand that. But I do understand that there are probably some councillors around the table that may have been closer to those conversations and may be able to better answer the question than I can.
Councillor Allen.
Look, this is a question possibly to Arthur, but just on page 1 of the FTDA submission, they quote from that 2007 letter, and there's a very strong statement made there, which is quoted, that council undertakes to provide garaging, etc., which suggests that FTDA has rights to occupy that space. My understanding, though, is that things have changed, and I think in the interest of absolute transparency, we need to know how it changed, and preferably when it changed, so that we fully understand the rights of the parties in this discussion.
Through you, Chair. 2007 letter that Mr. Roach referred to is in relation to the lease that was in place between 2007 and 2014. In 2014, that particular provision wasn't carried forward into the new lease, so for the last however long that's been from 14, that's not been part and parcel of that provision. I think the other important thing to be said is, as the Chief Exec indicated, the letter was written 15 years ago, significantly before the changes that have gone on now. Clearly, there are two parties, from our perspective, who are asking for use of the same area, which is why we're putting it in front of council and say, what's your preferred option for these people? Is it FDT? Is it for the FDTA? Fair enough. If on the other hand it's the Demand Trust, then also we would work to do that. We just need some direction on where council's going with it.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, could I have Councillor Case-Smith?
I was just going to ask around the possibility of the tram itself. Like, would we consider looking at other commercial options? When I say we, I mean the group, around maybe adding it to the cafe or turning it into a monument maker, similar to what they've done in Tauranga with the walker on the Strand. I mean, there's quite a few possibilities if it's never going to be used as a tram again.
The Chief Executive is going to respond to that.
Through your worship, I think to your question, Councillor Case-Simmons, the resolution that you're considering around council working with the Windmill Trust and the Foxton Tourism Development Association to look at options, I think that probably the scope of that resolution would allow us to explore with the association maybe what they are considering, but obviously with no assurances, given that really the Windmill Trust have the right of renewal to the lease.
Could I then have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Allen, and seconded by Councillor Brannigan. Any further? Councillor Allen.
So speaking to the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, That recommendation captured the spirit of the community board meeting, where they really did want to have a win-win situation. The late report that was brought to the board offered two options, recognising that we had to make a decision one way or the other in terms of a recommendation to council at this stage. And that's where, for me, this resolution is part of the story, and I foreshadow that I want to move a second recommendation regardless of whether this one is passed or not. So this recommendation values both of the tourist activities which energise Foxton, and as the FTDA submission tonight showed, this tram has a proud history in identifying something really precious and quirky about Foxton. And also it reflects a community endeavour, because so much of that was due to the community stepping up on the day and making it happen, eventually with support from A, government, and B, from the Borough Council of the day, but it was driven very much by the community. And so despite the fact that I'm going to express now, as I did earlier on, a preference for the first priority to be the Windmill Trust, for reasons I'll give, to me, it's also about this resolution saying that that tram station must not lie dead in the water if we can possibly save it. And I just want to put on record that Councillor Brannigan and I have already met with officers just to explore if there are some opportunities. The think tank is starting to operate, and I want to acknowledge and thank officers for the proactive way that they're trying to look at some options around that, which will, I'm sure, hit the council table sooner or later. I note also that the vote at the community board was unanimous on this resolution. It's a very clear signal from the board that they do want the officers to work with the Windmill Trust and the FTDA to find an alternative storage site for the tram. However, what's not addressed by this resolution is the discussion that happened on the order paper at the community board meeting, where the community board also spoke, there was no vote, but spoke unanimously in preference for option one, which lies in the late report, which has been forwarded to councillors, which was to enter into a variation to the existing lease to incorporate their extension of the cafe restaurant into the space currently housing the tram. In other words, that option, which was supported not by vote but by consensus of the board, said we actually have to pick a first step in this discussion. We can't have it both ways. And the board was very clear that of the two tourist activities, the windmill wins over the tram when a decision has to be made. And so I foreshadow that I want to move that as a recommendation for council, having been along with Councillor Brannigan at the board meeting and picked up that as being their will also.
Councillor Brannigan.
Yeah, thank you, and summed up beautifully by Councillor Allen. There's no doubt that both of these tourist attractions and Foxton played a huge part in that fabric and that creating that tourism experience in Foxton. We count the community board and us councillors, Councillor Allen and myself, that met with the Windmill Trust, who runs obviously the windmill, and the cafe at the precinct there at the Riverside Cultural Park some months ago. It was clear that the windmill needed long-term viability, needed to establish long-term viability, and the extension into the currently unused part of the building is vital to that, to get that long-term viability to allow them to expand the business, create more income, and provide long-term viability for that part of the park. Take the cafe and the windmill out of that park, we're looking at a massive hole. So we are seriously, the community board, very concerned about that eventuality. So it doesn't in any way, in my view, lessen the value of the tram. It's simply, the fact is that the tram has not been operating now for some time. And there are no guarantees, despite what Mr. Roach said, and I hope, and we all hope that he's right, that does become an eventuality again. it's still got a massive part to play in the Foxton experience. Conversations with officers have been very favourable in terms of, without any absolute commitment, finding a way to provide for the tram should it become up and running again, become active again. And in the meantime, as I understand it, there's alternative storage that's been established for the tram, so it's not sitting outside deteriorated. And Mr. Rush, I'm sure, is aware of that. So ultimately, it's important that the business, the cafe, is able to expand long-term viability to keep again that operation in Foxton viable. So that is certainly why the community board supported option 1, which I do too as well today.
Any other councillors wish to stay? Deputy Mayor Mason.
Is debate now? It's not just questions.
No, we've had questions, so there's debate.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. David and Ross.
Thank you, Your Worship. And likewise, I can see the absolute value in both what happens with the Foxton Tourism Development Group and with the Demolin Group. I will be supporting the option that's before us, simply because I can see there's a will to do some work with this group to get up and running in terms of the horse-drawn tram, and there are many opportunities with the development of the Riverside Park. But that Demolin precinct, that I think of it as, with the windmill and the cafe and the potential that is there year-round and 7 days a week, and also to the economic development that it adds to the Main Street viability, if you like, I think is something that we need to give consideration to, although I do believe there is also, and I hope, a place for the tram in time to come. I like the concept that the think tank is happening already, but supportive of both, but I am keen to see that that Demolin precinct gets some support to progress right now, and that the horse-drawn tram group have that support of working with the Chief Executive and officers as directed for their future development.
Can I also endorse those remarks? Having recently been part of the celebrations for Big Dutch Day Out and seeing how well attended that day was, and what a difference that whole area is making to Foxton in terms of its attractions and the visitor numbers that are coming. I think it's fantastic that we can actually support a windmill trust that is a voluntary organisation that is trying to do its best to make Foxton the attraction that it is. And I'm confident also that officers and with the help of our elected members of Foxton, including the community board, will find a solution in terms of the horse tram component of that. So I too will support this recommendation. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Jennings?
I just wanted to be recorded as abstaining. Thanks.
Councillor Allen?
Mr Mayor, as I foreshadowed, I'd like to move a further motion, and the wording is on the late report to the community board, which has been sent to councillors, I think, this afternoon, and it's 6.1 of that report, where the two options are given to the board, and option 1 is what I would like to now move, which is that the council enters into a variation to the existing lease with the Foxton Windmill Trust to incorporate their extension of the cafe restaurant into the space currently housing the tram. And if there is a seconder to that, I'll speak to it.
So Councillor Brannigan is seconding that. I'll just make sure that Grayson has got that recommendation down. Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, and you really said what I was going to open my remarks with, which is to recognise also the Windmill Trust and the fact that that is a group of volunteers who are driving a highly strategic, visionary tourist strategy for our district, not just for Foxton. You know, when we think of the Horowhenua, when we think of Foxton, we think of the windmill. How is that windmill funded? And a really significant income stream for that is the Cafe de Molen. And by freeing up roughly 50%, I think, of the interior space, if the tram were to go, the income stream must increase, particularly as we move into winter. And so my reason for moving this resolution this afternoon is because there is a real sense of urgency that we give the trust the ability to realise more cash so that the Windmill Trust can actually be in a more financially sound situation. Things have been tough for them financially, no doubt about that at all. And when things are financially tough and you've got a huge strategic asset in your midst, then we as a council have to step up, I think, and we can do that through this resolution.
Councillor Tukapu.
Questions? So first of all, that background information came in less than an hour before this meeting started, so no, I didn't get a chance to read that report entirely. My question is the renovations at whose expense and how much?
Arthur, do you have any indication of that?
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't hear the question, unfortunately.
Chief Executive has just informed me that she has the answer, so I'll let her tell you.
The report that's gone to the Foxton Community Board, which just acknowledging your point, Councillor Tukapua, was an oversight where I think in the future having those reports on the council agenda so you can refer to the context behind the decision the Foxton Community Board made. Option one, in terms of the extension of the cafe operation, the fit out of costs, it's not clear in the report. It talks about council making a contribution, but that the lessee, being the Windmill Trust, making a contribution. So I think my advice to you is it's not clear.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you. And further to that, will any future, if this resolution is successful, will any future lease reflect the investment that's had to go into that by third party, by council, and will that be somehow recouped by the lease?
Look, it's not clear, Councillor Bishop, that those things have been considered at this point in time. If I could, I suppose, just give some advice to the table, that I think that the resolution Councillor Allen is asking you to consider is essentially reconfirming and reaffirming your earlier resolution, but it's been clearer on the direct outcome that you're seeking to achieve. The earlier resolution, which is indirectly inferred that the tram site will no longer be occupied by the tram; it will be occupied by the Windmill Trust. I think all this is doing is more explicitly outlining that is your preference as a council.
Councillor Allen, before I give you the right of reply, can I just make sure that there's no other councillors that wish to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, I guess I abstained in the previous resolution because I just feel a little bit uncomfortable with the I don't feel like I have a full understanding of this, and I really appreciate the statements and comments from Councillor Brannigan and Councillor Allen that's helped that understanding. But as Councillor Tukapua noted, we only received that report, just prior to the meeting, and so for me, I haven't really got my head around this particular issue. So I just wanted to explain that I'm not going to be supporting nor opposing the resolution. I just don't have enough information at the moment.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say this is sort of somewhat putting the cart before the horse, or certainly the tram, because I don't think that these two are so linked, the last two items, and I think we need to get either a report that understands both and how they can work together, or have one clear direction first and then deal with this after we've got that, because I think there's a potential that one decision could frustrate the other.
Councillor Brannigan.
So yeah, listen, I think option one, what's looking for a surety for the Windmill Trust to continue to operate and plan accordingly. And this is what the surety that they're asking for. If you read the option, it's simply to extend, variation of the existing lease to extend the cafe restaurant to the space. It doesn't incur any costs on council, in my view, at all. So I'm not sure what not supporting this today would achieve. If there was a fact that there would be some financial support from council, I'm sure that's something the chief executive would bring back to council for consideration. But in my view, and I'm sure Mr. Allen will probably sum it up, but Councillor Allen will sum it up far better than I can, that this is imperative to get this across the line to give the surety of operation to the Windmill Trust that they're looking for.
Councillor Tukapua.
Just a question for Chief Executive. There sounds like there is some urgency, so would that form a resolution around bringing back that additional information around options and things? How soon or late is that coming? And therefore is the next step too far delayed, or it's adequate?
Through the chair, I understand that there is some urgency from the Foxton Windmill Trust. The current lease has expired. They obviously have a right of renewal, of which that lease would take them through until almost the end of 2023. But the clarification on this matter is what I understand why a lease hasn't been signed until now. Hence why obviously the Foxton Community Board have considered the item and have made a recommendation to council. I think it's worth acknowledging that the direct resolution of the community board and recommendation to the council table is what you've considered, and now there is a subsequent recommendation, resolution that Councillor Allen has put forward. But I just want to remind you that your earlier resolution that has inferred already that we are now exploring an alternative storage location for the tram. And so really what the resolution on the table is for you to determine is, okay, so we're now confirming that we're looking for alternative storage sites for the tram. Are we proceeding with engaging the lease with the Foxton Windmill Trust around the site in which this is the very reason why that earlier resolution was at the table.
So I'm now going to give Councillor Allen the right of reply.
Look, I urge the table to support this second recommendation. We have conflated two separate issues. The funding, the finance is quite separate. Nothing can happen in that front without a resolution from the council table. So all we are doing by this resolution is saying that we as a table recognise that of the two priorities, the one that matters most at this point in time is the Windmill Trust, with the urgent needs that it is facing. Going into winter, the need for extra internal space so that it can get on with the business of getting a better income stream to fund the operation of the windmill. That's what this seeks to do. The worry that in any way it will compromise the second leg of the program, which is about the tram, is not an issue at all, because we've resolved, as the CE has identified, that we are going to work on that thing. So look, to me this is about sending a really important signal from this table to the Windmill Trust that we're backing them and that we're going to back them at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Thank you. So the recommendation's on the table and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? So the motion's carried. Thank you. Moving to the proceedings of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, recommendation 2.1, 2.2, that we receive the proceedings of the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee and receive the minutes. Could I have a mover and seconded, please? Councillor Isaacs, seconded by Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving to the mayoral report, I'll move that this report be received, 2.1 and 2.2. Could I have a seconded, please? Councillor Kay Simmons. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Tukapua.
I have 5.
Five.
The first one, if there's sensitive stuff in there, just say I can't share that. My first question is on page 22 around your meeting with Department of Corrections and the engagement, reintegration and accommodation. And I raise it because there was the accommodation part, because there was significant public reaction the last time they entered into engagement here. I think that was
set your mind at rest that this had nothing to do with the re-establishment of any accommodation facility in the district.
Right.
It was purely an update and an introduction of staff.
We're just checking on behalf of those concerned at the time, because moving on, page 23 around your Three Borders update. First question, and this is for public viewing or listening. You've got there, and I think it's roughly paragraph 5, that the government announced to adopt all but 3 of the 47 recommendations. Could you describe those 3, please, that they won't?
Look, I have seen them written down somewhere, and they will be in some of the documentation that has been shared with elected members, but I can't recall off the top of my head which 3 they were, to be honest.
Okay. 4th to last paragraph on that page, that last sentence, another 1.5 billion will be available from the 1st of July 2024. I guess the documentation I've been reading that's coming through, it does not, my understanding, commit any future government of fulfilling that. Is that correct?
Yes, it would be, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. 3rd to last paragraph. That allocation, what do they call it again? Anyway, the better off funding, the bribe. Is, when I read in earlier documents, it was something, there was a reference to, because obviously we're being asked, so what do you think we should do with that? Should we accept it? We're meant to consult or it will come up with that in conjunction with iwi. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay. Second to last paragraph, the negotiating with DIA, has that been finalised?
The DIA negotiation had been finalised, but through legal opinion that's been received by some, Simpson Grierson in fact have said that no, that doesn't restrict our council's ability to publicly oppose or criticise the Three Waters reform by accepting this, and we don't anticipate that DIA to disagree with that. There is another Communities for Local Democracy meeting next week. There's not been one since the announcement of that update by the government a week or so ago. So I expect some further advice.
To attend that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, just in, carrying on from the questions of Councillor Tukapua about the better off funding or bribe, as she worded it. I just wanted to clarify one of the answers that you gave, which is so because I understand that we've got some important decisions as a council to make around one, whether we intend to apply for the Better Off grant, and it's an important decision in terms of the annual plan that we've got coming up. But secondly, the question of how that funding would then be allocated, if at all, or whether it would pay down debt or be held in trust, whatever. Was the answer that you gave to Councillor Tukapua that we have to consult mana whenua with around how that is to be allocated? Is that correct?
I'll let Chief Executive answer that.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Minister and Department of Internal Affairs have always been clear on the expectation that before councils determine how or what they will spend the money on, that they have demonstrated engagement with mana whenua. Probably back to one of your earlier questions, Councillor Tukapua, around the three recommendations that the government didn't adopt from the accountability and working group. One of them was around how the government will or will not make future financial contributions to the water entities in terms of guaranteeing them. But one was also in relation to the ongoing role of mana whenua. Those working parties. While there is some clear guidance that has come out from DIA, what is not quite clear but is becoming clearer is councils and entities like Community for Local Democracy who are advocating for us is around the expectations around iwi engagement, but also what His Worship just talked about in terms of our positioning, our lobbying and advocacy positioning against government when we're may or may not also opt in to receive the $4 million Better Off funding.
Okay, so moving on then to the item on page 25, the Council Work Programme. Could I move 2.1 and 2.2 that this report be received? Seconded by Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any questions, comments from councillors? Councillor Brannigan.
Just a very minor point of clarity, I'm presuming 22 June is meant to be 22 July, isn't that correct? Page 27?
No, that's incorrect.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, so it is imperative that we sign off the annual report before the end of June so that we can strike the rates. Yes. So, and as you well know, that we don't usually have a council meeting in July. Thank you. So, Councillor Tukapua.
Sorry, just for clarity, that's obviously open to change or additions, that program.
As indicated in the report, that was prepared prior to the new chief executive starting, so we can expect a more comprehensive update in the future. Might be a bit longer. So moving to item 9.1, which is the adoption of the Horowhenua 2040 blueprint. David is coming to the table. While he does that, can I move 3.1 and 3.2 that this report be received? Councillor Isaacs, seconded Councillor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Welcome, David. Any introductory remarks that you would like to make?
Good evening, Your Worship, Councillors, Foxton Community Board Chair. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here fronting the Horowhenua Blueprint and presenting it to you tonight for adoption. The report on your agenda sets out the background and purpose of the blueprint. The report also acknowledges the challenges of finding the right time to adopt a strategic document like the blueprint when the local context continues to evolve and change at such pace. The report recommends that Council does adopt the blueprint. Doing so will provide Council a point for departure, with the blueprint being a living document, one which Council can review and update as needed to stay current. Adopting the blueprint will enable the focus to shift from developing strategies and plans to Council implementing them. The blueprint adoption also becomes important for setting up the leadership of the organisation for success by providing a clarity of direction. And while I get to front the blueprint, I'm conscious there have been many who have contributed and helped get the blueprint to this point as well. So I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge and thank all those who have contributed to the blueprint, whether that be directly in putting into the blueprint, or to those who provided feedback on numerous Council strategies and plans that have been developed and adopted by Council over the last 3 years. I also want to take a moment to thank the both Ms Bold and Mrs Payton for their earlier comments. In terms of responding to those, in particular the comments around the Ramsar site, I've used the time between the comments and coming to the table now just to satisfy myself that the Ramsar site is captured by actions within the blueprint. And there would be two actions. Action 6.1, which refers to the Destination Management Plan, and also Action 11.3, which refers to the Foxton Futures Implementation Report. I do acknowledge that the blueprint only references the Ramsar site once, but because of the numerous references within those other two documents, I do feel it is captured. The Destination Management Plan talks about the Ramsar site being a polished Foxton gemstone, capable of becoming a highly significant future visitor drawcard, and includes a recommendation around progressing a collaborative approach between the Council, iwi, Wildlife Foxton Trust to develop a visitor welcoming information product based around the Ramsar site and its extensive bird life. And then within the Foxton Futures Implementation Report, there's numerous recommendations within there which extend from commercial boat tours to the Ramsar site, nursery planting for the riparian zones, education, guided tours, boardwalk and viewing platform. So I do feel by Action 6.1 and Action 11.3 that the Ramsar site would actually get due focus from the Council. So I'll leave my comments there, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, and specifically on the Ramsar site, and thank you for capturing 6.1 and 11.3. And just to make it more robust, would you agree that 12.4 would also enable us to place value on the Ramsar site?
Certainly.
Councillor Jennings.
Just a question, David, around I guess activation of these actions and the involvement of governance in terms of setting the priority and also corresponding funding that might be necessary to actually give life to these actions. Can you just take me through how you envisage this working, and obviously you essentially you cover it off in, I think it's under the financial considerations part of the report, but for those non-financial actions, so where it's more about allocation of human resource to facilitate or support or do a piece of work, can you just talk to me in terms of if we adopt this as it currently is, do all of these actions become live, or is there further governance opportunity to perhaps sequence, prioritise, and give the green light to some of these? Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm just seeing if I could quickly lay my eyes on the bit where I thought I'd maybe touched on that, but to explain how I would see it working, look, the blueprint isn't something which is going to be delivered overnight. It does need to be delivered over multiple years, and as such it will require a work program, and I'd suggest an annual work program to be developed to enable that to occur. So yes, in one breath, by adopting the blueprint, the actions do become live, but I think it'd be highly unrealistic to think that they're all going to go at the same time and the same speed. And so that's where I would see both an action plan, which forms part of the work program for the next financial year, being confirmed and agreed with the Chief Executive and the governance, and then that would be what starts to set that prioritisation around what is done, being financial, non-financial, and what hopefully as part of that conversation is what's realistic as well, and realising that some of those actions will either run across years or perhaps there is a sequence to doing one ahead of another.
And sorry, and can I just, as supplementary to that, so where there is already funding in the long-term plan, so for example, live-in town centre activation, where we allocated some funding, but we didn't necessarily specifically target or agree what was going to happen yet, you would envisage that the conversation around what fits within or what corresponds to that funding or how that funding is going to be used, that would be discussed as part of the agreement or discussion of that annual work plan. Is that?
Through you, Your Worship. I do see probably two parts to that conversation. One being that there would be the conversation about what's in the work plan, and then we've always talked about with the Live-in Town Centre as an example that there'll be briefings with elected members around trying to get that clarity as to what part of that strategy you want to advance and use that activation funding for. So I think there's probably two parts to it.
Councillor Casons.
Yesterday when we had community wellbeing, part of the report mentioned the live-in structural plan and that we were going to get an update at the August meeting of community wellbeing. So where and how does that fit into the blueprint?
So that is captured by action 10.6, which I'll just reference again for those that have in front of you. Work with the Wellington Regional Growth Partners on the live-in structure plan to guide longer-term development and improvement of the station catchment. And so that's a project which comes out of the wider Wellington Regional Growth Framework work.
Councillor Allen.
Look, I guess my question follows on the same sort of theme as Councillor Jennings. Given that this document is about actions and about providing some certainty, albeit over many years, as an officer, putting yourself in the position as an officer, how important is it to you when we adopt this, because we adopt this document, if we adopt it tonight, that the council role alongside each action is adhered to? Because there's a lot of nuance in here as to the role of council, facilitator, funder, etc. As a document that tries to give some level of certainty that we're committed to these actions, we have different roles to play according to this document. How important is it that we stick to this? I have a personal view, but I just wonder as an officer how you feel about it.
Thank you, and through your worship, this will be a personal view as well. The responsibilities of council and the different roles, I think are only as good as the time that they're written. The context will continue to evolve and change. Some of the actions in there, yes, there's quite a level of detail around them that we already know and with some certainty can probably commit to what sort of role council has. Others are going to go through an exploratory phase where perhaps council's role might become clearer, and therefore it may not be precisely captured here. But that's where I talk about this being a living document, and where there is something like that, where maybe we've identified ourselves as being a lead, for instance, understanding the outcome a bit more, we might realise actually we just our better role as a partner or a facilitator or something like that. And so I think those are all conversations which can evolve in time, particularly as context changes.
Any further questions? Okay, there appear to be none, so I'll now move 3.3, the council adopt the Horowhenua 2040 blueprint, and 3.4, that the chief executive be given delegated authority to make minor editorial changes that arise as part of the publication process for the Horowhenua 2040 blueprint. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Kay Simmons. Now open for debate, discussion. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you know, on the public record, this is a document that's been through some workshopping, quite intensive, and the last one I think was very late last year, December last year, where council had the full opportunity not only to dig into the detail of this document, but also to challenge it and to give direction around where we wanted it to sit. So I guess I'm saying that in terms of feeling that I have some ownership of this document. I want to talk about it generally in a moment, but specifically on the council roles. The reason I asked David that question was because this is pretty contractual with our community. So that if alongside a particular action we say we will be a funder, for example, I absolutely accept, and I'm sure the community accepts, that there is an annual plan and a long-term process which will identify what that looks like in dollar terms. But a funder still means a funder to me. So that where that sits in this document, and I'm happy with the role suggested in this document, where that sits to me is important. So if we do accept this document, we're accepting there'll be some dollars and it will happen. When and how many dollars is a separate discussion. So I just really want to put that on the table. I really want to thank everyone involved in this document, both internal, in-house, but also the contractors brought in to bring this together. And I know for a fact that no one out on the street is going to find their pulse quickening tonight when we adopt this document. Adopting a blueprint is not something that requires medical intervention as a result, but they should become excited because this is, and we've talked among ourselves as councillors, and we talked with our wonderful new CE a few days ago about how this council is weighed down with strategies and plans, and they're beautiful documents and they're well written, but where is the cohesiveness and where is the action program for those plans? Council Mark admired in our plans, but also made that very point. How are we going to pull these together, prioritise them, and have a plan of action? That's what this blueprint does. This is about delivery. It's about making a difference. And it's about accepting those two principles of having, I hate the jargon, livability and prosperity. Not too fond of those words. It's about saying that we want this to be a great place to live, and we want to be able to afford those things that it offers us. It's about those two pole. So that's why I think the people on the street really should have a quickening pulse. So those 12 areas that will make a great place to live, when you actually look at them, you know, who can disagree with priorities like a strong, well-defined sense of identity, that we know who we are and we're proud of who we are, developing that affordable housing, which probably actually should be sitting at the top if we are going to prioritise them, but that's a separate discussion. Supporting iwi aspirations, employment which is rich in opportunities, identifying ourselves as the food bowl of the Lower South Island and capitalising on that and marketing that. Strengthening education and skills, because that is about, I don't know what Councillor Brannigan's doing. Oh, the North Island, sorry, yeah. Bloody gravity. Supporting our communities. Levin Town Centre, Foxton Futures is on here, and both those are admirable goals and so on. Those are the realities of what this document not only box ticks on, but says we're going to do stuff around them. So, look, I really, really do commend this document, and I want to say that this now is about all those fine strategies, pulling them together, getting priorities in place, and actually putting some rubber on the road.
Well said. Councillor Bush. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So further to that, and thank you, Councillor Allen, for the excitement that you're engendering in all of us as we watch the launch of this and the way in which the dials are going to crank to the right of every indicator. Look, I'm really keen before this enters the vault with all the other strategies that we hold, is that we have a clear sense now of monitoring its success and gauging its effectiveness and celebrating that, but also having the ability to make some adjustments to an ever-changing environment out there. And I think for it to be all that it can be, we need to revisit its effectiveness on a regular basis. And we need to know if it is aligned and delivering what we hope and wish for at this point, and be brave enough to report on if there's anything that is not as we wished, and so we can make some adjustments, because there's a lot of time and effort being invested in this, and it does, indications that sits atop a lot of these strategies, but it doesn't have a carte blanche or an overriding, this will trump every other document that we have to abide by in the whole growth story of the Horowhenua. And we need to know that it's got its rightful place, and it's producing what we want to produce. So I'm really keen to put that on the monitoring program, please.
Deputy Mayor Most.
To speak to Councillor Brannigan. Kia ora, and I do, I'll be supporting the adoption of it for the reasons I'm going to outline, and Councillor Allen, my pulse has quickened a little bit, and I will refer to that later when I refer to another document. But I do want to acknowledge the work that's gone in, because as governors, we essentially are stewards of the district, and this has been a piece of work that's been done across community, but also officers have worked closely with all of the people involved. And I think it's reasonably aspirational, but it does, as Mr McCorkindale spoke to, provide some clarity for officers in operation when they're working with those of us who are in that role of governance. And what I want to speak to is what Councillor Allen mentioned and spoke to briefly, was the vision of the blueprint, and that speaks to things like resilient neighbourhoods, communities with pathways to skills and jobs, and housing that's affordable, but also that it's a favoured destination for visitors and new residents who want to contribute to our prosperity. The reason I'm quite excited about that is, and thank you Councillor Casemans for mentioning community wellbeing, is what I look for is some consistency with how we're working with our community partners. And at Community Wellbeing yesterday, we were given a case study that's been produced by our education partners, Kahui Ako, who are the representatives of the education Horowhenua across the district. And on one of the pages in their summary, they spoke to that the people in education have worked to understand what success looks for young people. And successful young people in our district are young people who are happy and fulfilled, who are confident in themselves and their ability to take on challenges, who have met with their own academic success. The reason I think that's really important to draw the correlation with what the blueprint offers us as governors and operators is that this is multiple year long as a document. So that speaks to intergenerational opportunities for change and to people to have a real sense of pride about being here in Horowhenua and what's going on for them. So I'll be supporting the adoption of this document that I feel really proud has come out of this council.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I too can get excited about parts of this document, which I think are definitely up to council to be providing, to be pushing along. I'm particularly interested in the parts where we act as a regulator and an advocate, a leader, a partner. Things like housing, provision of land, Three Waters infrastructure, those more basic things, a clear identity for our district. I agree that we definitely are the food bowl for the lower North Island, not only for green vegetables but also actually for meat and things like that. But there are parts of this that I can't get excited about, and in fact I feel like council is trying to take on too much, which isn't actually council. For example, the Blueprint Actions 8 and 7, I think that they are far more aspects that should be driven by private enterprise. I don't think it's up to the council to be providing a food hub in Oxford Street, for example. That's something that is private enterprise. I'm not sure it's even a good idea. I'm not quite sure where it even came from. At the moment, I would have trouble even getting in and out of parks in Oxford Street just for normal shopping without having people drawn to a facility there. At the moment, around our district, we have individuals and businesses that actually sell or promote their produce at different places around the district so that traffic can be dispersed. I'd much rather see a map or some sort of interactive device so that when people came into the district they could see where to go to access the different types of food that they might want to. So I'm just nervous that by adopting a strategy that we are going to, in time, I won't be here, quite a few of us won't be here, officers won't be here, this gets pulled out and is used in such a way that we're spending our time and ratepayers' money on things that aren't really our job to be doing. So I'm just a bit nervous about some of it. I would prefer to see it brought back again and had some further work done on it. I acknowledge that we have had workshops in the past at the end of the year. To me, by the time the end of the year came, some things were going over my head, and I don't feel that I do actually own the blueprint. I find the easiest way to look at it is actually go to the summary of the blueprint actions, which is on page 72 of the agenda or page 36 of the document. There's an awful lot of talk before that, and I would like an opportunity to actually come back to a workshop and just look at these and see, is that really all of that council stuff, or can some of it come out of there? So for that reason I won't be voting in support of adopting this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in a sort of similar position to Councillor Mitchell. There's parts of this document that really excite me, and I'm thinking, yes, this is a real drive for action, and we're actually, taking some of those key bits of some of those existing strategies and plans that have been adopted not only by during this triennium, but in previous trienniums too. but then there's, I guess, there's some new stuff as well, and so I'm not fully on board with the document, and I guess there's a couple of things that do concern me around the issue of the vision statement, and I think we haven't as a council around this table had a clear vision, I don't think, during this term. The vision statement in the blueprint itself is comfortable. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't feel like I own it, and so that's where I sort of share that similar thinking to Councillor Mitchell. I think the other thing that I'm nervous about is that the blueprint itself points to some strategies that haven't been formally adopted yet, and I think that's the 2040 and also the destination management strategy. We actually haven't adopted those as a council. I'm cautious about that. And so for me, I was thinking, well, I guess the assurance that Mr. McCorkindale gave both in the report and in his verbal answer around that governance input and that ability to still have some input into sort of the when and how much, that for me is a really important part of this. But then my colleague, one seat down, Councillor Allen, talked about it, described it as a community contract, and the wording around, well, if we put a dollar sign against it, we're giving an expectation to our community that we're going to follow through. And so that does concern me a little bit in some aspects. And I think I share Councillor Mitchell's concern, particularly around some of those things like the market building, where, and there's some others where there's that question mark still for me, is this our role? Are we sticking to our knitting? Is there enough focus on our core business and core role? Again, I think that can be, to an extent, addressed through the monitoring expectation and role that Councillor Bishop talked about. There's also that control mechanism through the budget setting process, and obviously I'll be encouraging the new council, whoever that may be in 6 months, that they take the time to fully understand this document and determine very early in the term about whether they agree with not only the vision that's outlined, but the direction of travel that the blueprint is promoting, and whether the actions are essentially the priorities that they want to commit to and fund. I just did want to talk also about, I guess, the actions under Action 12. That they do make me a little bit nervous in terms of how wide those potentially are, those actions. And again, that for me there'll need to be some discussion at that governance level around what that actually looks like in practice in terms of human or other resource. Very, very happy with the Action 1, and I definitely think that has to be an ongoing priority for this council in terms of housing and housing affordability. And so, one of the things that I'm really keen on here in terms of the actual blueprint itself, because it gives some more detail, is about this potentially making the council property portfolio available, or at least having those conversations with partners about how we potentially have skin in the game. So what we have is land, what we have is property, what housing providers and other partners don't have necessarily is capital or land, and so how can we actually develop those really workable partnerships to get the housing that we need, particularly that affordable housing with Kāinga Ora and potentially even our economic development partners. So look, I'm keen to hear the rest of the discussion and debate, and look, I want to thank staff and particularly Mr. McCorkindale for the effort in putting this together.
Councillor Branning.
Thank you, Bishop, and I will follow on provides a balance to perhaps the Grinches. But I think the document is a brilliant document by and large. Am I 100% into everything in it? No. But by and large, I think it's a wonderfully put together document with our involvement over a long time, over a lot of workshops and lots of discussion. And the way it brings together, I think, a lot of the strategies, all the things in a quick reference where you can go to some of these actions and get that information you're looking for in one place. Like many in this room, I've been around this table now for 9 years. I'd love to have had this document 9 years ago when we started along this journey we're in. And just probably a reaction to a couple of comments around, back to our core role. What is the core role of council now? It's evolved, and it continues to evolve. 9 years ago, 15 years ago, it was about pipes in the ground, and pretty much that's it. We know that in the way our communities have changed and are changing, and the world's changing, we have to change with it. Through Waters, the local government reforms are going to have a big play in that. And for us to have this document in front of us now, to be able to drive the work we're doing with our communities and get some of the outcomes that we've debated and talked about for a long time around this table, to have this document and to help guide us and provide the quick reference information and the overall strategies that are in here, I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I totally support it. Again, 100% into everything, no, but by and large, I think it's great. One other point I wanted to make was in terms of the dollars across the dollar sign in some of these actions, the labels council a funder. I wouldn't be scared of that. It simply says that part of our role in terms of those actions is that we will contribute some funds. How much fund we contribute to each of those things is decided through the annual plan and long-term plans. I just think it just gives clarity, it gives structure. I think it gives a lot of things we've all been asking for a long time. And I just really want to commend the staff and the councillors, the consultants that came to put this together. It's a living document. I'm comforted by the comments of Mr. McCorkindale following Mrs. Payton's comments earlier, which clearly outlines the status of that Ramsar site. It's so important to our district and our communities. Being a living document, in time, I'm sure that will be more probably demonstrated within that document. So I think it's great and totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Isaacs.
Thank you, Bishop. Yes, on a very similar note to Councillor Brannigan, I will be in support of this. It is a fabulous document that we have really spent a lot of time and gone very deep into, and I'd like to acknowledge David and his staff and everyone else that we brought in, and especially councillors as well. We have spent a lot of time on this, and like Councillor Brannigan, it's not 100% to what I would like, but it is very close. And I've had the reassurances today from officers and from Councillor Bishop, and with our new CEO, and I noticed her taking lots of notes of this, that to monitor it properly and to make sure we stay on track with it. But I think in the last 2.5 years and prior to this, we have so many strategies, and we've just got to put one in play and back what the work we've done. And the work we've done is extensive. This is a big document that's taken a lot of time. I don't know if the public understand how much work has been put into this, but it is a heck of a lot of work. And I think it gives us a good base with governance to look over it, with consistent monitoring, and I believe it's a good thing, and I will be supporting it 100%.
Councillor Tukapua.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying that I will be supporting the blueprint. There's just a couple of things I'd like to highlight, and I'm going to read from page 31st. And yes, Councillor Allen did mention it, but I'll read it word for word. The blueprint has aimed to answer the following questions. How does Council move forward with the implementation of its many strategies, policies and plans? Which goes first? And is one strategy and its actions a higher priority than the other? And are there interdependencies between the strategies that need to be recognised? And then I'll flick over to page sorry, 6 of the document, but 42 of the agenda, is a diagram which I guess this shows the relationship between a blueprint and these other strategies and plans, with this at the top and then the LGP and then 8 there, which take your point, the destination management strategy is not in there. Community plans and then annual plans, etc., including the district plan, and then below that the regional stuff. What I find conflicting is that one of our roles is regulator, yeah, so it's a main role, but with some of our actions, unfortunately, it hinders some of these priorities we have, and notably around the affordable housing, the social housing. At least I was made aware last week that a really fortunate for our communities, those that are struggling. We have all these setbacks around the implementation of social housing projects, and that's I struggle with that, and I hope that the adoption of this is going to perhaps make what do they call it? Action 10, moving the district forward, was it? Or keep the district moving, because that Action 1, Action 2, Action 3 is not happening at a speed I'm proud of anyway. The only thing that gives me comfort around the few minor things that I don't agree with amongst the actions is that this is set for an annual review, but can also be brought forward if if things evolve more quickly and we need to pay some attention to these things. And I acknowledge that there is a further action plan described under other considerations that will be developed as a result of the adoption for this. So I guess at which stage we can then say, hey, the timing of this or what have you can be brought forward. So overall, great, and appreciate the work that's gone into it also. But yeah, if we're serious about moving the district forward, please make it happen. And can I just, this is a little quirky thing for me. On page 59, it mentions under key sectors for us is footwear manufacturing. Now, I've lived here all my life. I don't know that we manufacture footwear in its key sector. So, how did that end up in there? I don't know.
I'm not sure either. I'm sure the author of the report will be looking interestingly at that as well. And maybe one of the minor editorial changes that happens. Councillor Kelly.
Tēnā koutou, te iwi, koe nei taku whakaaro e pāre ki te kaupapa hei mua i a tātou. Ka titero ahau ki tō tātou marae. E marae e te ahi kā. Ki tō tātou marae te whakapapa i konei o te whenua nei. Te marae e awhi mai tō tātou whānau. Te marae i hoatu ngā kōrero, ngā wānanga e pāne ki te ahi kā. Nei rau, ngā kōrero hei mua i a tātou. karem e whakaai e whāne ki te kaupapa. Engari, e kaupapa e mahi tahi ki a tātou. E tahi wā. So what I'm just referring to is that even though I'm speaking about in reference to our marae that are within this our area or the tangata whenua, I'm speaking about how our maraes are the ahika, or the ahika is the place where our warmth and our kōrero is spoken. It's our well-being is nurtured. Our nurturing is taken place. And so when I think about our marae, and there's probably, just in proximity, there's probably about 20 marae just within the Horowhenua District that we're either connected to or whakapapa to. And so I'm referring to our marae, and I want to bring it back to us as councillors, as the local body. We are the ahika, or the place where that is the pito, that is the belly button of the birth of things that are happening here within our council. So when I sort of look at those analogies and metaphors, I think about how we are putting together a document, and I congratulate all of our officers and all of us, to try and with lots of meetings to try and give a voice or a vision to what we can see for the future. And even though I did say that in Te Reo that I don't totally agree with all of it, because in terms of some of the other, there's some things that I think still need to be fleshed out. There are some things that I'm, really pleased about that for our district. So I'm going to support this adoption. And as David has said and shared with us, this is a living document, and it's and we may not be those ones that will be able to govern or regulate or even be part of the council to be able to make sure those things happen. So at least we've got something on the table that we can sort of give some voice to our community. This is the vision of the ahika, the firelighters, those ones who are holding and stoking the fire so that others can be warmed around their marae. And when I say their marae, I'm talking about your houses, your houses, your home. That's where your marae is. That's where your warmth is. So I'm hoping that we, as one of those ahika, or that place where we birth something, that we are able to give some comfort and vision and to our community. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Councillor Kasem.
I was going to say something. Knowing that we can review, amend and update, I'm more than happy with that, so I fully support the blueprint. There you go.
Short and succinct, thank you. Look, I too will, can I just endorse all those comments that have been made in support of this document? I think this is a very significant milestone, not only for this triennium, but for the life of this local body. And that we have often talked about having aspirations and strategies that we wish to deliver to our community, but to have it actually written down in a form that is both realistic and 2.5 pages of actions that sit in front of it, I think will be a document that will be sitting alongside councils in the future for them to consider in terms of that decision-making direction that they seek. I don't think, yeah, sure, we can look at isolation, in isolation at a number of different action points, but overall the strategy does deliver a lot of what we have talked about for some considerable time. And sure, we have talked about that we have too many strategies. We've talked about the fact that most of them have not been delivered on. I think this is a strategy that actually we can deliver on, and those into the future will deliver on. I think also that I don't think you should underestimate the value that this will have for those that are considering coming to this district. They will see a vision and a plan that is in front of them. I think it will also give central government agencies some confidence that we are actually thinking about a great variety of different things that we know that we need support on, that we know that we need to consider in the future. So I too will support this, and can I also acknowledge David and his team. And I go back to a forum that we held in this chamber with Gus, with Ree, with Cobus and Shamaville, which I think this is really what came out of that discussion, and it was quite enlightening to have those sorts of people tell us the potential that we have in front of us, and I think this strategy actually will help us deliver that potential. So with that, can I just move that recommendation? All those in favour? Against? Mrs. Mitchell, Councillor Mitchell. The motion is carried. Thank you. So, moving to our other strategy. 9.2, adoption of the updated Horowhenua Growth Strategy 2040. Can I welcome Lauren? While Lauren is getting seated, can I move 3.1, 3.2 that the report be received, and 3.2 the matter is recognised as not significant. Councillor Brannigan, seconded Councillor Isaacs. All those in favour? Thank you. Lauren, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, Councillors and Foxton Community Board Chair. I'm very pleased this evening to be presenting the updated Horowhenua Growth Strategy for adoption, and just wanted to spend a moment or two explaining the purpose of the strategy, how it differs from the 2018 version, and then how that strategy will be implemented going forward. So the purpose of this strategy is to inform Council's land use and infrastructure planning, and to support a coordinated, sustainable and responsive approach to managing growth. This strategy represents an update from the 2018 version by accounting for the increased population projections that were adopted and used for the 2021 to 2041 LTP, and to better respond to national direction, such as the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which existed in a different form in this growth strategy, was initially prepared back in 2018. Key differences from the 2018 strategy, in addition to updating those population projections and providing additional growth areas as a result, is that this strategy differentiates between the growth areas that we expect to see develop in the next 10 years, the ones that we expect to see develop in the 10 to 20 year horizon, and then the ones that we expect to see develop in the 20-year plus horizon. And that will be really helpful in terms of informing both our district planning and our infrastructure planning. Taking this step will help Council to clearly articulate and plan for growth, and to make sure that we use our valuable land resource efficiently in a way that will set a platform for delivering on a well-functioning urban environment. This strategy will largely be implemented through district plan changes that will seek to rezone the growth areas identified in the strategy, and this district plan change process will provide the opportunity for more specific features and considerations to be taken into account, such as natural hazards, topography, cultural considerations, ecological matters, and the density of the different areas that have been identified. Additionally, this process provides public notification, submission and hearing processes so the community have the ability to participate in the land rezoning process. Overall, this refresh strategy represents an evolution in Council's growth response journey and is an important step to support future growth related work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren? Councillor Jennings.
Lauren, this might be a question that's not for you and might need to be directed elsewhere, but page 57 and 58, it talks about the market response and the need for Council to prioritise growth areas. And one of the things that, when I read this, I was reflecting on that back in the long-term plan deliberations and discussions, there was some discussion around this concept of potentially having a sort of a contestable growth capex fund, so that we could actually say, well, this is how much we're committing to growth-related infrastructure in each year of the long-term plan, and to sort of encourage and promote that idea that people that are ready to, in those potential growth ready areas, who are ready to go, can come to us and say, well, I'm ready to go, back me first, deliver the infrastructure needed to enable this growth. So I just want to make sure that what we're proposing in terms of the actions there, in terms of that, I think it's the heading, the landowners liaison, where the approach that we're going to be taking to, I guess, getting a feel for people's appetite, is it going to be, well, are you able to talk more about the approach and how we're actually going to do it? Are we going to wait for people to come to us, or are we going to go out and engage with people, or are there some of those tools like a contestable growth fund that could actually sort of try and help things move along?
Through your worship, the growth strategy does identify priority growth areas, and by priority I mean timeframes, but I would say those aren't set in stone. I guess what they indicate is the ones that appear to be a priority from a planning perspective in terms of sites that are the least constrained, are the closest to existing urban areas. And while those might at the outset be the priorities for being identified for rezoning, it doesn't preclude people coming to us with private plan changes or with resource consent applications and entering into site-specific conversations about how growth could be facilitated in those areas ahead of land rezoning. And in fact, the National Policy Statement for Urban Development directs that we do consider those sorts of applications that would deliver significantly to development capacity. But it's probably something that needs to be considered at a case by case. Something's actually put in front of us that we can quantify what the development capacity would be, what that proposal would actually deliver versus what the cost would be and how that could be provided with infrastructure.
Councillor Mitchell.
So just for clarity for the public, basically by adopting growth areas and then going through plan changes to accommodate those, to bring those into being, it basically takes away the resource consent need for people who want to develop land as long as they're within those areas, right? If you want to develop outside them, you have to go and get your resource consent.
through your worship, the identification of growth areas and then the subsequent rezoning process makes the resource consent process much simpler. So by that I mean if you have land that's rezoned to residential, there's often, or in all cases, there's still a requirement for you to get a subdivision consent. But by the land being rezoned, it is by and large enabled by the district plan to allow for a pretty straightforward consent process where we just are checking that the rules are being complied with and that connections are being made in accordance with the design guidelines set out in the district plan, as opposed to a consent process that is for an out of zone activity that would in many cases require engagement with neighbours or some form of notification. And it gives, I guess, a much higher level of certainty by the land being rezoned, which follows on from the growth strategy, that a consent would be granted.
Just following on from there, can you just clarify then on page 24 of the document, which is 106 of the agenda, just settlement principles, the bottom bullet point says discourage growth onto the potential long-term future growth areas or other areas not identified in the growth strategy unless all identified growth areas have been developed or removed from the growth strategy. So does that mean it's going to actually be quite difficult for people to subdivide outside of these areas? That's, to me, it signals that.
I guess the intention of that principle is to ensure or to encourage growth in areas where we have been investing in infrastructure, as opposed to a less coordinated or less strategic approach. However, each application, should we receive one, does need to be assessed on its merits and would be weighed up against the benefit it would offer against the environmental impact that it would have. So it was not to say that you absolutely couldn't, and I suppose I should also clarify that by settlement principles, it could probably more accurately be described as urban settlement principles. So this is, I guess, direction around that true urban development that would rely on council services as opposed to small scale lifestyle or rural type subdivision.
Thank you, Lauren. So, moving now then to 3.3, that Council adopts the updated version of the Horowhenua Growth Strategy 2040, updated 2022, and 3.4, that the Group Manager, Customer and Strategy be given delegated authority to make minor editorial changes that arise as part of the publication process for the Horowhenua Growth Strategy 2040, updated 2022. Can I have Councillor Kay Simmons is moving. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jennings, thank you. So the topic is now open for debate and discussion.
Support it.
Should have. Thank you.
Support it and thank you, Lauren.
Yes. Okay, so the motion lies on the table. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Yes, congratulations, Lauren. Well done. Thank you. So that brings us to a close of this meeting. Robert, would you please do the honours and close our meeting, please?
Tēnā koutou anō. Tēnei te mihi aro ki a koutou, kei raro te koro ai. Kia tata katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou riki au hukolaiti me te arahau te atua, me te whiwhinga teitanga i te wairua tapu, ake. Amen. Kia ora tata.
Thank you all, and thank you to staff, their attendants, those watching still on live stream, and those members of the public that are still with us as well. thank you for attending today's meeting. Councillors, we now have a meal break and we'll be back for our first briefing in a half an hour.